Had some mild brake noise and grinding on the old 4Runner here. This is the wife's car. Whew. I wish I could say that was easy. That was probably one of the most challenging brake jobs I can remember doing. Certainly in a long, long time. Time for the front brakes. I went ahead and did the other side to make sure I went ahead and made all my mistakes before I told you guys how to do this. And since the other side is already done, I have an example of what it looks like when it's finished. This is the finished product. I wish I could say this whole process is easy, but working on this 4Runner is actually a bit of a challenge. So be prepared to take your time. Be prepared to spend a little bit of extra effort. First step is going to be to turn this steering wheel so you have access to the back of the caliper. Given the minimal warning time on these brakes, just a couple of days, no squeaker really at all before these brakes completely failed. If you own a 4Runner, for the love of God, check your brakes regularly. Look at how thin these pads are. Had no idea because the squeaker wasn't telling us, but look at how much that piston right there extended out of that caliper. And the back, boy, howdy was it bad. I'm gonna start by just spraying this thing down with some brake cleaner to knock some of the dust. Whew, glad we don't have smell-o-vision on this thing. Oh God, this California compliant or whatever, non-chlorinated brake cleaner smells awful. The next thing I want to do is pop this retaining clip off for that brake line. There's no flex in this solid line here that runs back behind the caliper. So there's no way to move it if you don't get some flex out of this rubber guy back here. My plan is to take the caliper off, remove the rotor, and then remount the caliper for the next steps. I've got a dead blow hammer and a little wedge punch handy, so I'm gonna use those. Just as simple as putting the wedge here up against the spring clip and then just tapping it with a hammer on the backside. Now that that's out of the way, we'll get some flexibility when we pull this caliper off. There are 2 bolts on the back side of the caliper. You wanna make sure you're only pulling these 2 bolts off. These other bolts around here, well, they separate the 2 halves of the 4-piston caliper. We don't wanna remove those. Just the 17s, this guy and this guy. Make sure you're double checking. Definitely gonna need a pipe to remove these things. They are tight. I went ahead and loosened those 2 bolts, but I left this thing intact. I'm gonna basically back it out slowly because what I don't want is I don't want for this caliper to fall. It's extremely heavy. All right, I got both bolts removed. I'm gonna do my best to kind of see if I can move this caliper and I'll let you guys kind of see what's going on here and what I'm talking about with that hard brake line back there in the back. Do you see it moving right there, right here? By removing that spring clip, we created just enough room that we can move this caliper back and out of the way, hang it for just a second, pull the rotor off, and then remount this caliper. We want it remounted because it's so much easier to do these 4-piston calipers with this thing just kind of steady, especially with this hard line. I've got the caliper just far enough out of the way to be able to pull the rotor off. See just that little bit of extra room up there between the hard line and the rubber line? That's all I'm gonna get. These are the 2 anchors I was talking about. It's really hard to see from the backside, but those are the only 2 you want to remove. You don't want to take anything else apart here. Got our caliper rehung. Now we can remove these brake pads with no rotor in the way. There's 2 spring clips, one here that holds the pins in, and one here that keeps the pads pressed out towards the pistons a little bit. This one has to come off, then the pins can come out, and this bottom one comes out with the bottom pin. And don't worry about this pin as long as you have replacement pins in your kit. Mine definitely comes with them, so I'm not worried about it. I just want it out. Out and out of the way. Get out, guy. Boom. And off it goes. No big deal. Little dead blow hammer action to start this guy off. And then I'll just use a punch to get it the rest of the way out if it won't slide out easily. And it won't. Now that I got this top pin started, I'm gonna go ahead and take this spring clip out. Woo-hoo-hoo. So this bottom pin ended up being just slightly bent for some reason. Prevented it from coming out so easily. What I did was put a whole butt ton of PB blaster on all the parts around here. None of this is gonna be reused, so I don't have to worry about oil getting on stuff. And I'm gonna clean it with a brake cleaner anyways. Then I took a pair of vice grips after I tapped out just a little bit, and I just hooked it to this end. This would be the end with the little rounded tip. And I grabbed onto that bad boy and I twisted slowly and pulled at the same time. Worked it out. Slid the inside pad off so that it wasn't creating any friction, because it's going to grip this pin just a little bit. And then as I got closer to this one, I slipped this pad off so that the only thing holding it in was this, and I just had to work it and work it and work it. If this happens to you, take your time, go slow, don't get frustrated. Think about some different techniques you might be able to use to get it done. One more shot with the brake cleaner. Hit all the parts. All 4 pistons, cleaned off all that oil that I used. Got all my new parts set out and ready to go. Just need to grease the backs of the brake pads, 2 slider pins, and set it in. And that's the next step. Got the rotor ready. Don't forget to clean your rotor when it comes out of the bag before it goes in the car. Most of them are packed with some sort of preservative grease junk on the friction surface. We want to get rid of all that. Just a thin layer of grease on the back of the pad. This guy's got a squeaker right here, and the squeaker's going to go down into the rear. Down into the rear. It's time to compress the caliper. I got one of these fancy things designed for a 4-piston caliper. It's meant for a reversible gear wrench, but I don't have one of those. So I'm gonna do some pulling and tugging when I get done here, but it's not gonna be super tight. The tool just sits in flush against the pistons on both sides. And then all you gotta do is crank it, and it'll push those pistons right back into the caliper. With the pistons fully compressed, it's time for reassembly. Just a light sheen of grease on this slide pin, and then I'm gonna slide it in most of the way. Got the outboard pad already set in place because the pins come in from the outside. That way I can just slide the inboard pad, again, the one with the squeaker, down and towards the inside on there, and then the pin will slide in, and then I'll do the bottom pin. Top pin's in, both pads are set in, and now I'll just slide in the bottom pin. Don't forget, before you slide this bottom pin in, you gotta put that spring clip on the bottom. It's just gonna go in the middle. If you've forgotten its orientation, you should have the other side ready to go so you can take a look. Always have the other side as a reference. Don't take both sides off at the same time. I just used a set of needle nose pliers to set these in. Make sure these little tabs that stick out, they're supposed to sit on the back side of the pad when you set this in. It's gonna take a little finagling. Again, just take your time, relax, just get it done. Same with this back spring. You put the center in first, and then there's little holes for the spring clip to sit in. Just use some needle nose pliers to set them in there. Not too bad. With the pads in place in the caliper, we wanna get both contact sides of the rotor clean. Once that thing is ready, we'll remove the caliper, hang it up out of the way, set the rotor on, and then move on to the next step. Got the caliper removed, hung out of the way. Notice there's no pressure on this line. I've relieved as much as I can. Took the rotor, put it on, spun on one lug nut on the top and one on the bottom. This gives me a little bit more space to be able to swing this caliper on because the rotor's not gonna move. This next part's gonna be really fiddly. I gotta get that spring clip for the brake hose back on here before I put the caliper on. It's really hard to get the spring clip on after the caliper is in there because this solid brake line here really makes it a challenge to move the caliper around. This part sucks, ladies and gentlemen. Just get ready for fiddling. I ended up having to pull the rotor back off in order to get that clip in there because I needed just a little bit more room. At the end of the day, it's just a lot of fiddling. I just got the bottom caliper mounting bolts in here so far. As you can see, the caliper's still pretty loose because I haven't put the top one in yet. Got it here, ready to go. That probably took 2-3 minutes just to fiddle it around. You're gonna wish you had about 10 hands. I did do it with just my 2 hands. I held onto the caliper with one and kind of maneuvered that rotor with my other. I do have a little bit of experience, so if you need an extra set of hands, call your wife, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your brother-in-law, your sister, whoever, just somebody that's handy. Have them just give you a quick hand pulling that rotor out of the way while you fiddle with this thing to get it back in. I wish I could tell you guys this was easy. It's not. All right, there she is. All done. A nice free spinning rotor. It's tough. It's a tough brake job to do. Toyota did us no favors with this hard line in the back and all of these things. Just made for a challenge. But you can do it yourself. I imagine if I was doing this every day, it'd be a little bit easier. But I don't do this every day. It's not my primary job. Anyhow, this whole wheel well was full of brake fluid yesterday. Parts got delivered today. I'm gonna take this wheel off and see. My bet is that either a caliper has blown or one of the brake lines went out on this corner. Next step to properly diagnose this problem is to rip this wheel off. These lug nuts are a 22. Let's take a look at this caliper. Oh boy, look inside there. You see the wetness? It's kind of looking to me like maybe the caliper just extended beyond its emotional range. Definitely metal on metal back in there. We'll rip this thing off, see what it looks like. Got some cool little threaded holes there to help push off our handy dandy rotor. Both of these big bolts here, they're both 17s. Oh boy, look at that. Seal is definitely broken up here. Gonna need to replace that whole caliper. Let's Strange thing I noticed when I was checking out this caliper, it looks really weird, full of metal dust. Looks like it's actually been grinding on the back of the rotor. Peeking back here in the back, looks like the brake pad on the inside pushed the old eject button, took off down the road. No idea how that happened. Absolutely crazy. Pure insanity. Don't think I've ever even seen anything like that before, but there is no pad whatsoever anywhere back there. Not on the floor, didn't come out when I took the caliper out. Nothing. Had to order some additional parts since this caliper is completely trashed. Went ahead and got a new caliper for both the rears, just in case. Also, because if I'm doing one, might as well do the other. Well, there's a lot of reasons. Anyhow, got the wrong brake pad sent here. Not real happy about it. Waiting for new brake pads, waiting for calipers. Hang that out of the way, get the rotors on, get this thing ready to go, so that when the parts get here, everything can go back together real quick. This bolt and this bolt hold on the caliper mounting bracket. These are 17s too, so all the caliper hardware here's a 17. The top one needed a deep well socket to get around this hard brake line here. Notice the bungee cord keeping the caliper up to keep pressure off of the soft line back. Don't want this soft line right here to get all kinked up and damaged. I already have enough problems going on. Took a look inside here, looking for that brake pad. There it is, right there. Jammed in behind the dust shield. That'll come out when I pull the rotor off. As I pointed out earlier, there's a couple of threaded holes. Those are for bolts. Found this guy lying around the shop. We're gonna crank this thing off now. Even pressure. Couple turns here, couple turns here, couple turns here, couple turns here. Okay, got both of these guys touching. So now what I'm gonna do, whoop, you hear that? It's popping off. There went that extra pad. Whew, launched out of there. All right, full transparency. I had to get much longer, fully threaded bolts and then get after it with a dead blow to get it off. It was about one whack away from getting a full hammer. If you're not reusing your rotors, fuck it. Just be careful and make sure you're watching out for the threads on your studs here. Here's a slightly better look at the back of this rotor. Boy, I really wish you guys could feel this through the TV or computer or laptop or whatever. Man, it is bad hola. Whew. Just for your awareness, this happened within a few days. It was mild squeaker noise, mild rubbing on Monday. Today is Friday. These brakes went out on Thursday. Very unusual, very surprising. New brakes are these Power Stop Extreme heavy duty. We do a lot of mountain driving here. So I figured, hey, let's get the heavy duty ones. I've been road testing some of these Power Stops on my car for a couple of years. I'm super happy with them. We're not sponsored by Power Stop. I just like the brakes. So we're doing pads, rotors, and the new calipers coming in are also Power Stops reman units. Best practice before putting on new rotors, check the shoes. Make sure you got plenty of shoe left. It's just an emergency brake, so it shouldn't be a problem. You shouldn't have to replace them ever, but double check and make sure before you put the new rotors on. These look good, so I feel pretty confident. New one just slips right on. You can see, it's upside down here, but you can see it tells you which side goes where. I like to put a lug nut on to go ahead and pull the rotor all the way in, make sure that it's good and tight while I'm installing everything else. First thing I want to do, install the old caliper bracket, because I'm going to use it to hold the old caliper in place while I disconnect the brake line. Got the caliper and bracket reinstalled loosely. No need to tighten it down. The only reason why we have it installed is to keep everything steady while we unhook the brake line. The brake line is right here, and having this installed just gives us something to put just a tiny little bit of pressure on. Notice that the slide pins aren't fully installed. They're just there to hold the caliper and keep it from moving. That's their whole purpose. Just tight enough. They don't need to be super tight. I'm not even gonna put a wrench on them. This guy right here, that's a 14. Easiest way to get in there is gonna be with a wrench. You're gonna have to bleed the whole system anyways, but if you wanna bleed it less, get you one of these locking plier things. Put it right there on the soft toes, somewhere where it's out of your way. And that'll keep the fluid from going down and keep more in your system, making it just a little bit easier to bleed in the end. And we have a video, it's somewhere around here, or it'll be at the end. If you wanna know how to bleed your brakes, check that one out. Got our brake line out, gonna pull the caliper off and replace it. Make sure you have a drip pan handy, because this guy is gonna leak a lot. And your brake line's probably gonna drip at least a little bit. Be ready. Thor or somebody installed these slide pin bolts. I don't know who it was, but dang, he was strong. I'm gonna have to use the old to get it off. I do not recommend this. I recommend getting a Dale. I don't have a Dale today. I've been doing this all by myself. Slide pin bolts are out of the way. Calipers disassembled. Guess what we're gonna do? Yeah, you guessed right. we're gonna put the bracket back on, mount the caliper, and then install the line. Pay close attention here. I'm gonna zoom in for you. You see those little ears right there? Right there. So you're looking at them little ears? That is where the metal bend of your brake line is going to sit when you are finished. See this little bend right here? That guy. That's gonna sit in between those little ears. New caliper came with 2 copper washers, one to go on this side and one to go on the back side. Don't know why this one doesn't have any on it already, but they're little crush washers. You should probably install them. I'm going to. All right, same thing here. Everything's just loosely put in. Used a bit of a wrench on the bracket just so that it wouldn't shake around, but I didn't tighten it. I just snugged those. These guys, still loose. Just want to keep the caliper from moving around too much. They don't really hold the caliper in anyways. They're just slide pins. There's my 2 little copper washers I was talking about. I'm gonna slide those on, one on each side of the fitting. And then it looks just like that. All right, if you need to, take this caliper off if you can't get these first couple of threads in. I didn't have any problems, but I don't know what kind of mechanic you are, so if you need to, pull it off, get those first couple of threads in, then just slap it back on real fast to tighten it down. See how the metal part is right through the ears? Perfect. Now that everything's all secure in here, just pop this guy off and get it out of the way. Don't forget to clean all the brake fluid up with some brake parts cleaner or something so you can check for leaks later. Makes it a whole lot easier. Caliper and bracket are both coming back off so we can install the pads. New pads come with little spring clips. These little tabs right here on the side all go towards the outside. You see there aren't any in the inside. When you're installing these, I found the easiest way to do it is install it from the inside and push it out because of this little tab right here. I'll try to do this one-handed and see if I can get it to work. So we want to go from the inside, snap the inside in, the outside's still going to be sticking out. Boy, those things are tight. Yep, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this one-handed. There, you get the idea. Got all 4 spring clips installed. I'm going to tell you, I found the easiest way to do this is leave the bracket off while you install the pads. They basically have to come from the inside and shoot out in order to fit in those spring clips because it is tight. Tight. Grease all the contact points. And the back of your pads. Got this outside one installed off the car. The main reason why this is the easier way to do it is because you can see the bracket actually obstructs the pad here. Installing it this way makes it just a bit easier. What I'm going to do with this inside pad is I'm going to put it inside here and I'm going to slide it outward towards the outside of the bracket or inward towards the inside of the car if you were thinking that kind of way. But anyhow, this one's a little bit easier because you actually have room on the outside to try to slide it in. It's just really tight. This way is easier. All right, and there you have it, folks. It's all done. Everything's all tightened down. Everything's all finished. Only thing left to do is bleed the brakes. Check out our other video, wherever it is, posted here. I don't know, link in the video somewhere. And once you're done with that, PowerStop has a break-in procedure they recommend. 5 aggressive decelerations from 40 to 10. Don't let the brakes cool. Do 35 to 5. Don't let the brakes cool. And then 5 minutes of driving without cooling the brakes. Or to cool the brakes down. There we go. And that'll help seat the pads and get everything right and keep noise and everything else down. See you later. Like and subscribe. Let us know what you think. She gone. Pure insanity. Only 1 brake pad left in there. Yikes.